Okay, Algebraic Expressions Part 2. So if you haven't watched the first part, which is one-step and two-step equations, you need to go back and watch that one first. So just a little review. Two-step algebra equations could look like this. So if you've got a question like this, equation like this, the first thing you always want to do is add or subtract both sides. Bring down your negative 4x equals, subtract, and then your last step is always going to be divide. So you could get equations that have parentheses. Let's say you got that. So this is technically a three-step equation because the first thing you've got to do is you've got to get rid of these parentheses. Now, if you've watched a lesson on order of operations, you know that you're supposed to solve what's inside the parentheses first. But if you've seen my video on expressions, you know that you can't solve what's inside first because this term has a variable and this term does not have a variable. So you cannot just add those together and get 6x. Don't do that like a lot of people want to do. So if you've had that lesson, you know you need to distribute whenever a number is touched in parentheses. So you're going to multiply this 3 times both of the terms. So first you get multiplied times the 2x, and you get 6x. Then you're going to multiply it times the positive 4, and you're going to get positive 12. Bring down your equals and your 18. Now you're right back to a two-step problem. So all we did is just add one step to what you've been doing. So I want you to try this one. Okay, pause your video and try to work that on your own. So you should have done 2 times 4x, which is 8x. 2 times negative 8, and even though that's a minus, it's treated like a negative when you're multiplying. So you get negative 16, but then it turns back into a minus. In algebra, negatives and minuses are basically the same thing. It just depends on if you're adding or subtracting or if you're multiplying or dividing as to how you treat them. Anytime you multiply, you always treat it like it's a negative. So now we're at a normal two-step problem. So get rid of your 16. Bring down your 8x equals, do your addition. Last step is to divide. Should have got 5. Now you've always got to be able to deal with negatives. Okay, let's say you've got this. So when you're multiplying, this negative is going to get applied both times. So negative 5 times positive 3x is going to be negative 15x. Negative 5 times negative 6 is going to change it to positive 30. So whenever you multiply, make sure that you're sorry, I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was even going to say. It'll come to me. Oh, I know what I was going to say. When you're multiplying these numbers, make sure you don't just bring this minus straight down. Okay? Don't write your sign down here until you've looked to see what your sign's going to be. So like over here, we had a minus, and it came down because it was a positive times a negative, which comes down as a negative. But here, we've got a negative in front of the 5 and a negative in front of 6. So when you come down, it's actually going to be a positive, so you change it to plus. And don't write plus minus or minus plus. You only need one operation in between those two terms. Okay, so we get rid of the 30. Bring down our negative 15x equals. And if you know your integer rules, you know that same sign means add. I see a lot of people want to just ignore this negative and say, well, 30 minus 30 is 0. That's not how it goes. And if you want to practice on your calculator, you have to enter it a certain way. So the first number, you always have to use the negative symbol, which is at the bottom. So you hit that once, 30. For the second number, you have to use this minus key. I think if you use a negative key there, it gives you a syntax error. And then hit enter, and it's going to tell you it's negative 60. See what happens if you enter it wrong. So there I hit a negative. Yeah, it tells you a syntax error, and it takes you back to the point where you messed up. So you can change that to a minus to get the right answer. And if you start by hitting a minus instead of a negative, it's going to bring back the answer that you got up here, and it's going to apply it to this next problem. So a lot of people do this just because they're not thinking when they're putting it. And so you end up with whatever your previous problem was, minus 30 minus another 30, which ends up being way too big. Divide by negative 15, divide by negative 15. You can enter this on the calculator two different ways. You can just enter it as a fraction. So the fraction symbol's right there. You got to use negative, not minus. 60, down key, negative again, because you're dividing, so they're treated like negatives. And then you can just hit enter. Now, if there's something else you need to enter into the calculator, you have to hit over to get outside the fraction. But you could have just hit enter, and it will give you 4. You can also enter it like this, negative 60. You can use the divided by symbol, negative 15. Enter. And it'll give you the same answer. So you could have something like this. I can't remember if I covered this in the last video, but we're going to review it if we did. So when the entire side has a fraction symbol under it, then the first thing you've got to do is get rid of the 4. Now you could have a problem that looks like this. Okay, that's different because the fraction line doesn't go under every number. So in this case, you would have to get rid of this plus 2 first. But in this case, you cannot get rid of this plus 7 as long as there's a 4 underneath it. So the easiest way to work these problems is to multiply by 4. And all that does is cancel that 4 out with that 4. You got to copy the step to the other side. You bring down the top exactly how it's written, equals, and then you multiply. And in this case, the last step is going to be adding and subtracting. So x is 5. And we'll go ahead and work this, even though there's none like this on the packet today. So in this case, this is a 3-step problem, and you will be doing this in the next video. So first thing you do is add or subtract. So subtract 2 from both sides, bring down x plus 5 over 3, equal sign, subtract, and then you would multiply by 3 to get rid of that 3. Copy that step over there. Those cancel out. Bring down your x plus 5, your equals, multiply, and then the last step is going to be subtract. Okay, I think I've covered everything. Let's do a few where it has the variable on top of a number. So the first step is still the same. Always add or subtract if you can. Subtract 6 from both sides. Bring down your n over -4 equals. These are the same signs, so you add them together and keep the sign. Multiply by -4 to cancel that -4. You can punch that on a calculator. 2 negatives become a positive. 32. All right, let's look at the packet. I'm going to do a few off of there. These confuse people a lot because that zero's in there, so I'm going to do this one. So first off, this is on the right hand side, so you're going to be dealing with the right hand instead of the left hand. Just because it's mixed around doesn't mean it changes what you're doing. So the first thing you want to do is get rid of that number that's by itself. You always do deal with a 5 last. So since this is a positive 4, even though it doesn't have a plus in front of it, it's automatically assumed to be positive. You would subtract 4, and then you come over here and subtract 4. Now don't bring down a 0. A lot of people will do that thinking multiplication facts. 0 times any number is 0, but you can add and subtract numbers from 0. Just to show you, 0 minus 4 equals -4. Bring down your n over 5. Multiply both sides by your 5. So n is -20. Let's come down here and do one at the bottom. So again, the variable's on the right hand side, so this is the side we're going to be dealing with. So you got to distribute. -12 times x is going to be -12x. Literally just putting them beside each other. Don't forget to multiply the -12 times the 5 to get -60 equals 144. So you deal with the variable last, so you're going to get rid of the 60 first by adding 60. -12x, and I realize you probably have to use a calculator, but it's 204. The last step, divide by -12, divide by -12. I think that's 17, -17, but I'll show you just in case. 204 divided by -17, or sorry, I'm giving you the answer. -12 is going to be -17. So x equals -17. And it doesn't matter which side the variable ends up on. They're never going to have the answer like this on the test. They'll just flip it to that. There's no difference between that and that. Okay, all your answers to these two sheets are on the second pages. So check your answers as you're going. And that's the end of this video.